My guest here today was Hilary Morgan, a dear friend of mine here out of Cole McTavish. Some of the main things we discussed were how to make marking more efficient, the pros and cons of standardized assessment, the transition from a small rural indigenous school into a bigger McTavish school and what that transition has been like, and a few other things along the way about how she is also not from Cape Breton. Very strange to learn that from her. Hope you all enjoy. Watching you work, I see someone who just grinds so hard, but I always wondered, I didn't understand how you do it.
Coffee, no sleep, stress.
Well, and this is kind of where I'm stepping into controversial territory a little bit, is that when I went into my practicums, literally the one thing I worked on in university was I'm going to learn how to write. I want to be as good at this as I possibly can within 4 years. Did the arts degree, blah, blah, the whole whatever. My first thing in my practicum was, you know what? I think where I can provide the best benefit to my students is in improving their writing. Mm-hmm. That to me was this can be my kind of service to them.
Yeah.
And then, so my first practicum, I am teaching English 30-1.
Hey, welcome.
And we're doing a critical analytical on 1984. Luckily, I was familiar with the book, so I was I was not expecting to teach English at all. So, but I get into it, and so I asked my teacher, my mentor teacher, if I can mark some of her work for her. And she was like, "What? Why?" she was like,
"Do you know what you're getting yourself into?"
And so we started off with them, and she's like, "You know what? I just want them to write one paragraph. I just want them to just kind of scaffolding a little bit for that."
Yeah.
And she said, I was like, "Cool." So I was like, and then she said, "How about you just take half?" I was like, "Sure, whatever." So I was all excited. I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do marking for the first time." I was so pumped.
I know, we're so new and fresh, and it's so fun. So,
well, and then so I go home on my deck, and I was sitting down on the front porch. I had my computer out. 3 hours goes by. I'm like, "Oh, I've marked 7 paragraphs. There's 33 students in this class." And I'm just okay. So, and then we did another one the next week.
Yep.
None of that feedback was taken into account, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm just wasting my time." And so now, I actually have reduced so the way I've kind of changed my feedback, and I kind of want your strategies of how you kind of minimize it over time. One strategy I've heard is that if you do, let's just say you do 2 critical analyticals in one semester, it's just or in 6 weeks, whatever.
Yeah.
The first time you mark it, you assess them on half of the rubric. The second time you mark it, you assess them on the other half of the rubric. That way they've been given feedback on each component over 2 different essays. That was one thing, that's not what I do.
Okay.
That's a tip that I heard from someone else before.
Yeah.
For the position paper and the source analysis now in social studies, I even did the math that it gives on the board, and it ended up being for one essay, or for one batch, if I have 4 classes and I give one essay to all 4, it's 130 hours of marking, once it's 9 minutes per essay and all that kind of stuff. So, but to me, I noticed that when I would sit down to mark, I just hated myself. I was I would rather take rusty nails into my eyeballs than sit down. And not that I didn't want to do it for the student. Yeah. It's just, I know everything I'm going to type in the next 4 hours is not even going to be read. And I'm just going to hate myself.
And that's the thing, feedback is so tricky because, and this is the issue, a colleague of mine at McTavish said this so perfectly, that sometimes with education, it feels like the teachers are doing more work than the students.
Yeah.
And when it comes to feedback, I do sometimes feel like I am putting in more work to give feedback that then on the next go around, not a single bit of it has been taken. So in those cases, I just print the feedback from the first one and I attach it to the essay. I have the exact same comments as the first one. And I will highlight, I'm a big, I love that I type very fast. You see the rage typing. I'm a rage typer. So I don't find the feedback takes as long as I'm typing. But if I want to highlight the specific lines that students are struggling with, going through a text or an essay like that takes a lot of time, and I don't know how, other than it taking forever, I cannot see a way that I can do this effectively in a time appropriate manner that doesn't just eat apart my weekends and evenings. I don't know, the half rubric thing is tricky because, like, are you just not marking them on their conventions and grammar for one part? Because that's half of the, like, one part of it, and like, that would be tricky. I think
what it was is I'm still gonna mark you on that. Let's just say I marked, or the person who did this marks 2 parts of the rubric.
Yeah.
I think for the other 2, they wouldn't give written feedback, but they'd still give a mark, and then like if you ask the question, they'd still sit with you and talk about it. So I think that's kind of and so I am not a fast typer at all. So when it comes to me giving feedback on stuff, I've kind of taken a 180, and then I actually provide pretty minimal feedback even on writing. But the funny thing is that I hate myself as equally, because the teacher guilt eats away the teacher. But I have actually found it more beneficial, only because what I've been doing instead is that during a work block, because typically, if we're trying to think about like the overall use of our time in a week, if I give a work block, for example, what I've been doing is that I tell my students, I print them off now. This is what I've recently started doing. I'll highlight the things that are incorrect or that I think need work. And then I give check marks to the parts that I like on their essay.
Yes.
So when I give it back to them, because the thing is, my 5-minute comment on their essay, I can deliver that same message to them in 30 seconds, talking to them.
Yeah.
So that to me has been like, okay, what is the most efficient use of time for both of us here?
Exactly.
Because half the time, in my experience, is that I'll give feedback, and like by the time you're on essay 12 or 13 in a session, you're starting to kind of get it, so that students would come up to me and say, you gave me all this written feedback, but I don't get it. So now you're kind of, okay, now I have to sit and explain myself anyway. And so I've actually kind of incorporated feedback into my class time.
That's incredible, because then it takes, I think the past 2 weeks, I stayed after school every single day except for Friday to sit with students in English 30 and also Social 10 about writing feedback. And them wanting me to go through it. And the first question I would always ask them was, well, did you read the feedback? Well, no, I want you to explain it to me. And I'd get frustrated because I'm like, this is my own time. Like, I want to go home. It's been a long day. And so it's the point of me writing all of this. But if they are missing and don't understand how to explain how their evidence connects to their position, me typing that out isn't going to explain it either. So I love the idea of, here's the assignment, work block, appointment based, like I'm going through these 10 kids today, the next, like, and this is where it becomes a challenge of time though, with class sizes of like 30 whatever, trying to get through 30-second, 1-minute, 2-minute feedback sessions with 30 kids becomes really tricky.
Well, and so the thing that I found is, partially for like, I don't want to also spend 30 hours a week marking, and also I know the kids who want feedback, because usually it's your more higher achieving kids that want feedback, which is unfortunate, but it's like having your appointment for your kind of lower kids. But the thing to me is, like, as teachers, we're kind of told to be available all the time anyway. Yeah. And so the way I kind of done it is, I am available every single day after school. And I do have kids that come in, and it was actually, I've had students, usually they come in and they're fired up. They're fired up because my mark wasn't good and your feedback doesn't make sense. Right. But the second I have a conversation with them for literally 2 minutes, they're like, oh, I see everything you just said. I'm like, what?
Okay, good. Yeah, see, I've had to change it a bit around for me. I've had to, again, because I'm trying to, that work-life balance thing, try to make that happen this year. I just said Tuesdays. Tuesdays I'm here till 5. Yeah. I'll be here till 5. It's a drop-in thing. Yeah. I can't.
Office hours.
As much as.
Darn, it is not on purpose.
One-on-one support for every single student is just not feasible. It's not possible. Like, what do we? I think the clapping. I don't know. Clapping hands. I've got the high school dance songs in my head.
Hey.
I saw one feedback approach that I liked, and I don't know where this rubric. Somewhere in our drive. I love
the Google
a
Drive,
shared drive with the whole school that you're like,
a shared drive if you don't have a shared drive.
I'm just going to put in the word Gatsby and 30 things show up. Or like source analysis rubric that I don't like the one I was using. I want a different one. Like, which it's okay. To be fair, it's the same rubric. I just don't like the formatting of it because I'm just anally retentive about formatting.
Yes.
But one rubric that I found had the mumbo jumbo of like what each element of the rubric is. That the kids, I mean, that is so worried. Like turning it into, this would be a great PLF idea.
Yeah.
Turning a rubric into students friendly language so they get it. But then underneath the rubric was like, here are these like, it was like 5 bullet points under each argumentation, evidence, communication. Under each category, it had 5 bullet points of evidence needs to connect better to your position. And you just highlight that if that's the main issue with this essay. Instead of me going line by line and highlighting each time. Now, if I'm saying I want to show students your argument did not connect to your evidence, so I'll highlight that, and I like the idea of making a little key, put a star by it, and put a star by that highlighted piece on the rubric. Like, trying to make the rubric talk more for me. I'm trying to do more, like...
Especially for students, because, like, if literally, and, like, going into my 3rd time teaching a diploma course now, I hammer the rubric language. Like, usually I used to just say, okay, I almost made the mistake myself of, okay, the students just understand basically or generically what a rubric is.
Yeah.
But when you actually show them examples of like, because there is some room for subjectivity in interpreting a rubric from a teaching perspective, and then the marking help with like, okay, there's ways to kind of come together on what we mutually agree from our professional judgment what a satisfactory or a proficient or an excellent is.
Yeah.
But if you don't share that with the students, they're just like, oh, I think I'm excellent because my mom thinks I'm great.
Yeah, or like, well, I got a 90 in social 9. So I'm like, oh,
like grade 3, I was killing it.
Okay, sure, but yeah, no, front loading, that is one thing that you do really well that I'm like, I need to start my year next year doing that, to be like, before we even get to the assignment, here's how you were graded.
Yeah.
I do integrate a little bit more with paragraph writing stuff. When I'm writing a paragraph collaboratively an exemplar with a class, that like I will write enough to show them what limited looks like.
Yes.
And then I'll add a little bit more and say this would be satisfactory. Add a little bit more proficient, and then teaching the difference between like what can I add here or change that goes from proficient to excellent according to the rubric. Like that's taken a little bit more time, but that is so valuable. So I think making our rubrics talk more for us saves us the time of. I think there's this
project.
No, PLF. I have so many ideas. McTavish Shipman.
Yeah.
There's always a thing at the end of PLFs like, do you have ideas? I do. I say nothing. I say nothing because I'm so scared. Like, I don't want them to think I'm being too much. I think making our rubrics more student friendly, but I think there's this expectation that all essays have to be like, and the feedback I used to give was you'd get the essay back and whatever pen I was using, it's just a page covered in purple marks.
Yeah.
And students would find that intimidating, A, because they think it's wrong, but B, they're not seeing the like, this is a beautifully constructed sentence, great evidence. Like, I like to provide that feedback because I feel like it's in depth, but if I'm not, I don't think it's sustainable with class sizes the way that they are.
Yeah. So
I think using rubrics is communicating to them, giving them the feedback about why they got the grade, and letting myself accept that and not go further. But again, it's that perfectionist in so many teachers
100%.
that will kill a weekend of marking.
Yes.
And providing all this in-depth feedback that then they don't understand or don't use when the rubric communicates the same thing or could communicate the same thing. I'm getting, as of course the year drags on, I've started just using the rubric more to be like this, and this, highlighting a few key sections here, but so many of our students, I think, are just attached to what's the grade?
Yeah.
The students that want to get better will read that rubric and they'll come to you and they'll ask for clarification, and they will compare their work to an exemplar, and they will see the disconnect if they want to. And maybe I could do some more work in my class to compare their work to an exemplar to show them that. But that is the crux of humanities, is that we all care about our students, and so giving feedback is a communication of that care, that we want them to be better and we want to see them improve. And I think a lot of us feel the only way they can improve is if we spend an hour marking each essay, going line by line analysis.
That's just kind of been my thing, where I think the reason I love teaching, like I still every day, I'm more pumped than most people, and I'm like, I'm just like I don't want to.
6 years in, there's bags under my eyes.
I don't want to hate teaching. And so I'm like, you know what?
Well, that's the COVID thing. COVID did this to me.
I think marking would make me, is one of the things I'd be like, okay, I'll teach something else so I don't have to do all this. So
that was the beauty of a small school, is that not only do you have less, because it's just less students, but I got to teach forensics. I got to teach something that I absolutely love, forensics 25 and 35. I got to teach legal studies. I got to teach often stuff that I felt compelling, the kids were engaged in.
Expanding your kind of intellectual challenges a bit.
And did not involve the piles of marking that I have as a humanities teacher. Like, I think that's the one thing, like the pre-COVID teaching in me, post-COVID teaching, was just this like pressure to provide so much feedback because we are so concerned about learning loss. And that I somehow feel this downloaded responsibility that I have to be the one that closes that 3-year gap where students were told, do what you can and that's okay.
Whereas I'm post-COVID, I'm like,
hey. No, COVID didn't kill my love of teaching. It killed like
the energy that you have to put in.
That I'm like, I had a lot of, we all had a lot of realizations about our jobs with COVID, and mine was like,
this is your energy. You spend this much marking. Well, it's like, how much are you going to put into the actual...
The planning of a lesson.
Some will suffer. Like, you're going to be like, okay, I had this lesson that I taught 2 years ago, and I'll just teach it again.
Yeah.
Rather than like, okay, I only spend this much marking, and now I can reframe and actually teach something.
But then there has to be something said to like the students who do take the feedback, and they turn it around, and the next essay they pump out is
100%.
the most... You can see where they've used the feedback, and that growth... It doesn't happen as often as the students that you're really trying to engage with, but it's such a reward, and it makes me want to keep giving that kind of feedback. And I don't think we say on students' essays enough, like, this is excellent, or like, I love the way you said this. I think there's like, what's that model? I think I learned it in my master's, the glow and grow model. Like, for every piece of like, hey, you spelled this incorrectly, find something that's good. Find a positive element of feedback. Like, our kids shouldn't be... The first time I ever gave back essays to my students in ANZAC, it was like, I think I used the purple pen. They were like, oh my gosh.
Not a Sharpie.
No, oh my gosh. This man, unhinged. The other day, we were doing PLF time, and I was editing our social studies 10 exam, and you were marking some essays, and I could like smell Sharpie, and I was like, that's weird. Over.
Why would they be
Lucas is hand marking essays with a red Sharpie bleeding through everything. It was so unhinged that I stopped what I was doing mid-rage type, looked over, and demanded that you use something that wouldn't bleed through the paper.
I was like, it's good call.
A finer tip.
On paper.
Oh my god. It was so... I felt so mean too. I was like, this is
I was like, please be mean.
Like use this
pen. If I'm being an idiot, tell me. But again, this is kind of and so I do kind of take into account.
Psychopath moment.
If my students who perform more poorly on an essay, usually, I do give more feedback. I do. And so it's usually the 60 to 80 students who don't care.
Yeah.
Because your kids who are like, obviously they don't want to fail, but your kids are, and so like, it's not that I give no written feedback. Even now that I am handwriting, most of my columns for the most part are like, I actually find it easier because sometimes as you go through a position paper, sometimes you'll write in a comment like, oh, this is contradictory to something you said before in the previous paragraph. Yeah. Where now I physically draw a line.
Oh yeah, and I pointed here. Yes. Oh yes.
So I have found that helpful.
Yeah.
And so the way I'm kind of reconstructing my feedback process is that usually what I found valuable with diploma marking was before we even sat down, so like you've seen the diploma, they had a group discussion of like, okay, this is our prompt. What can we expect to see from this? So you have 6 like highly educated, and then but we'd go through and say, okay, this was the prompt. This is what I would expect to see. This is what I would want to see. Yeah. And I found that before, if I was marking, I would be like, okay, I have an idea of what I'm looking for. Yeah. But when it's actually written out, I'm like, oh, that's you. Now you kind of have a reference of like, this is what I'm expecting, and then I found it useful to. Now obviously, if you're the one teaching, you can't expect that they're going to reach the kind of what you would put on it.
And that's the difference with this writing stuff. How do we make writing that's not like, if writing is not a prescriptive formulaic thing where you have to have this line, this line, this line, but we want students to be more creative and have more authenticity to their writing, their authenticity might be different than what I perceive it to be. Like that disconnect is so hard.
Well, I do that list now with student examples. while I'm reading, I'm like, okay, this is what someone in my class was able to take and apply that I thought was good.
Yeah.
And then usually I'll start a class. So I've kind of like walked back how many like films I watched in a class. And, like, I don't know.
Films are a killer.
And so
much time.
The reason, like, I'll start the class. I'll say, you know what, this was your prompt, and I'll say, this was everything that you guys put on your paper. And so right away, I find I hand it back over with their marks, blah blah blah. Before I even talk to them one on one, they're already rereading what they wrote and seeing what's on the board. And so now they're like, okay, now I'm seeing the gap in in what the expectation is on their own. So I find there's only so much like I can say to you about your writing before you're like, the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't know.
Because taking feedback at all is an act of like, it's constructive criticism. Yes. And students get very defensive. I do too. My gosh, I'm like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah. Like, I can cite properly.
APA what? APA is me.
APA is stupid.
It's so dumb. But there's only so much that like, okay, at what point is it a productive use of our time to keep doing
what is the perfect way to give feedback? That's really the question. Is like,
and it depends on the student. There are some students that there are some, like I have a lot of, like grade 12s now, and a lot of students who want to see their writing, they want to compare it to an exemplar, and they want that. I have some students who want, okay, miss, you said that I need to vary my sentence structure. How do I do that? And they want those like sentence starter graphic organizer sheets, those like cheat sheets of here's how to start sentences in a couple of different ways. I have some students who do not understand what I've said in the written feedback format. I sit down and I explain it to them, comparing it to the assignment, no problem. So it's a student's like preferencing, because we all learn differently. That writing feedback, that is the killer. That is the killer right now of humanities teachers, and why so many of us are burnt out is that it's not a simple Scantron.
No.
A lot of our science and math, colleagues have to. There's a lot of like proving your work and going back and showing it's this step that you might have had a challenge in, and that's why you got the incorrect answer. So it's not to say that these teachers are harder, but it's a style of learning that is so individual. It's so tricky.
And so I guess this kind of relates back to the point earlier about like the Carl and like the position paper is one of the ideas in university that specifically for teaching social, it was looking at the curriculum in two different ways. One was curriculum as document, meant to be followed like word for word, like you don't stray, versus curriculum as thing. I mean, like something to kind of be interacted with. Yeah. So my kind of thing is there a way that you think you could kind of apply the creativity process in different forms of writing to build the same skills required for your conventional essays?
Oh, that's tricky. Like for the Carl in English, I mean, sometimes it's like teaching students that you're basically like a little detective trying to go out and find this evidence and prove your point. But I can't think of, I guess in like grade 10-1 a couple of years ago when I was in Anzac, my first Carl was a visual essay. I wanted them to be focused on how symbols and motifs contributed to theme, and I wanted them to illustrate those themes, and it just gave me a topic sentence for what each paragraph might be. We studied Limetown, the science fiction podcast Limetown, and I had some of the most brilliant visual essays. Like students were understanding like the prompts, the prompt is this, and I'm going to choose this protagonist. I'm going to go back to the podcast and find these 3 symbols or these 3 motifs or 3 ideas that prove this. And I'm gonna like illustrate that visually. There was some writing. There was a topic sentence they had attached to each. They had to make a thesis statement for the intro. So I think I'd be more willing to try that in 10 and 20, but I just feel so much pressure in 30 that I wouldn't want to waste my time with drawings, which isn't a waste. Like artistic expression is so important for so many of our students, but it's not something I would risk at the 30 level because I just want them focused on.
Nope, sorry, this is what you signed up for.
Writing
Don't worry, you're going to graduate after.
Writing only. And the big joke in grade 12 English, I think I hope other English teachers in Alberta feel this. Right, guys? Right? You feel the same way? Is that like almost all texts in grade 12 are just the most depressing. It's everything. Love is dead is what the grade 12's last semester. Love is dead was the theme. Was that all happiness, like most short stories, very depressing. And on the Rainy River, Tim O'Brien, he gets drafted to the Vietnam War that he doesn't want to go fight it.
Yeah.
Just brutal. Yeah. The boat, Alistair McLeod, the pressures of traditional lifestyle with modern lifestyle. His dad drowns at the end. Great. Like, it's just, there's some really sad stuff in there. I'd love to find a way to make English less sad. Yeah. But more creative, I don't know. I don't know. And I've tried, like this year, a convention I went to, one possibility, it was like, writing poetry in response to the diploma exam. And I thought it was about poetry reading comprehension, because a lot of students struggle. Those are the toughest ones on Part B. And I went, and I forget the name of the poet. He's a teacher in Calgary, I think. But what he did was, like, he took the diploma questions and flipped them around and wrote poetry using them. And it was a very anti-standardized test. Yeah. It was so cool. But then had a student illustrate them, and he put them in a book of poetry. It was incredible. But again, I'm like, okay, that is a creative, incredible expression of that outcome of creating text. You have to create text. But again, I just get so worried. I'm like, but how's that going to help them on the diploma? That's always in the back of my head. How's that going to help them with the Carl? So I don't know. Like, maybe I need some therapy about the diploma. But I'm more like practicality in grade 12. About like, maybe we can have some creative outlet and expression in grade 10 and 11. But by grade 12, it's go time, and in 4 months you write this thing, and I want to have, your foundation is there from grade 10 and 11, hopefully, and I want to refine that and give you as many texts as possible so that you're as successful as possible.
Absolutely. So, moving on, shifting gears a little bit here, do you feel that, so one of the big things for me that I think everyone adapts over time is, like, what is classroom management? Like, what did you kind of learn from university that like helped or didn't help from practicums? But I'm mostly like interested in, how did the Northlands classroom management style for you, and like how did you adapt going from this small, you are the English 7 to 12 department versus now you have 3 to 4 classes of 30 to 35. How does the classroom management, like, what does classroom management mean to you? And like, how do you go about
this? Has changed so much from rural to urban. So I think I always, like, I have a mom congratulations to me. Weird oh no, this is recorded. My mom's an English teacher, and she's still an English teacher. She's incredible at her craft, and her style is what I'm trying to do, and that is like firm but fair, and very high expectations of academics and behavior in the room, and to establish clear routines, clear outlines, and expectations.
So what would be like a clear routine for you?
Oh, the cell phones.
The cell phone.
Cell phones. I was so weak on this first semester because I was like, I'm a new teacher at McTavish, I don't want to be too mean, and a lot of feedback I got from admin was like, go back to what you were doing. Like, be more strict on this. I had to purchase a pocket chart. Yeah. Turns out finding a pocket chart for 37 students is tricky. The only thing for 30. They're like 30, and like that's not our classrooms.
It's not math.
Not math. So that, I think my perspective in a rural school was like, there were so many other socioeconomic factors going on with all of our students, but you feel it more when you know your kids so well in a small setting. True. That sometimes school is not the most important, but having relationships with the students made my classroom management a bit easier in Anzac because I just saw them every single day. I saw them since they were grade 7. I coach them. I see them in the community. When I'm out walking my dog, they're on their quads saying hi. Like, it wasn't that I had perfect classroom management in Anzac. I had struggles. We all have struggles. But you felt, because you saw them every single day, there was a tighter sense of respect and camaraderie between staff and students. And more of like, okay, if you say, let's just say Johnny has his phone out on day 1 when you don't know them versus day 30 when now you coach them in the community. When you say in your more, not aggressive, but a more authoritative tone, like, Johnny, put your phone away. They don't react to you. They're like, totally. They know the expectation.
They actually know if they feel like, okay, this person wants me.
And in Anzac, I got to teach. I wasn't just a core person. Like, students who struggle with English, they're not your best friend because you represent what they struggle with. But they might have me first semester for English, but the next semester they're doing forensics with me. We're doing like a blood splatter lab, and they're like, what? They're seeing me in a different way, and they're seeing a different course.
That's kind of a good point for like all teachers maybe teaching options, because they kind of
see us outside of a core
the intensity
components.
of like the expectations.
Yeah. So I think relationship building, like Anzac taught me the key to relationships, that like your students will not trust you. They do not care about the feedback. They will not care about your class unless you care about them and make it engaging. So Anzac taught me that lesson. Here though, with so many students, I feel like a first year teacher sometimes, that I'm like, I'm back to basics with that phone is going in that pocket chart for 90 minutes. My job is to get through these outcomes. We're going to have bad days when you just throw in the towel for the last 10 minutes and give some free time. That's different, but students know to arrive. Like I have students who are running down the hallway to get to my class on time, because if you're late, it's a detention. You waste my time, I'm taking yours, which is really harsh. That's not really who I am. That's not who I am.
For me is like the first, because you know what? High school, I was a -2 student. I was like, what's 5 minutes? And there wasn't really a consequence for me in high school either. And so now I'm kind of like it's like a weird balance of, if I do plan stuff for the first 5-10 minutes, they're not going to be there. But then if I don't, then they're not going to be there. So it's like I may as well.
Trying to structure our 90-minute block around when students may or may not come is just not feasible. So I am trying way harder this year at just being firm with my expectations, but fair. Like if you've done the work, the paragraph submitted, we're done the lesson for today, jump on your phone, take the last minute to yourself, relax, go for a walk. Like do what you got to do, not here.
No, but it's been strange because like even this semester especially, I think it's because I'm teaching now like through the warm period of the year. That I have a 30-2 class, social, needed to graduate, and then it'll be on Wednesday, and I'll literally be like the day before, tomorrow's a very important content block, be here, and there's 16 of 33. I'm like, whoa, like what?
And then I'm remembering like one thing I remember about Anzac too is remembering that because there's so much to go on, like sometimes it's student skipping is what it is. Sometimes you're like, there's 1,000 other reasons for why they're missing, but how can I like put this routine expectation? Students know if you miss a block, I have my missing work bin for anything tangible that was handed out. Don't come chasing me down about why you weren't here yesterday. There's a labeled bin. Go to the bin and get your stuff. They know to email me if they don't know what's going on. I'm not going to reteach the lesson. They know that everything is on Google Classroom. Every slideshow, every note, instructions of we did slides 20 to 30 today. Watch this documentary. Like I got that from COVID, from being like, document every single thing you do, so it's like a time capsule for the students who haven't checked it in a couple days. So I keep those routines and expectations firm, like I do it all the time. I do try to be fair, that it depending on the student, if you're blatantly keeping your AirPods in after the 18th day of me telling you to take them out, I'm going to go further with consequences, because that's just a blatant disrespect. But I try to be fair at the same time, that like the goal of these expectations is not to make you suffer. But there is a curriculum expectation here. There's an expectation that, especially if you've chosen the 10-1 route, you are choosing an advanced academic stream. I have to provide that for you, and I need your mind and your effort and energy here, not on your phone, not with your AirPods, not running around the classroom, and sometimes not sitting with your friends, which sounds brutal. I thought making a seating plan was ridiculous, like when I came to McTavish, because again, Anzac, there's 10 kids. I would have to move students if they were just being off task too much, but you just sit where you want. It's a small room. I had one year where I had these circular tables and I sat in the middle, and it was a discussion-based class. And I would, for feedback days, I'd sit in the middle and just rotate my chair and help students individually. It was amazing. Class of 35, like if there's a seating plan. My job is to not help you socialize. Like maybe you'll meet someone next to you that is going to become a friend.
Crazy idea.
Whoa, new friends. But
crazy.
You've got an hour lunch. An hour, that's so much time. You've got a lot of time to go socialize. You've got a break in between classes.
It's 7 minutes now. It used to just be like, when I was in high school, it was 5. It was like, you were dashing. Like, you could barely even take a piss in the middle. Now it's like, you get 7 minutes, and they're like, oh, I'll come in 4 minutes later. I'm like, I hate you.
I try to be firm but fair. That's my biggest thing right now. Firm but fair. I got some feedback. I remember my first couple years of teaching, I was going through some family stuff. I was really homesick out here, like really missing home. And students, I used to do, and I still do, like those student feedback surveys at the end of the year that I should probably be doing more about like what kind of lessons worked for you, what kind of things didn't work for you. And one student was like, Miss, when you're having a bad day, you like take it on us. Like we feel it. And I was like, that should never be the case. Like I'm the adult here. It's very hard to be performative and on all the time, but if I'm having a really tough homesick day, that's not their fault.
I have noticed that even for myself though, if it's just like, if it's -30, it's a dreary day.
Yeah.
I didn't sleep while my cat was waking me up. I get into school first block, and I usually try to crush coffee in the morning, so I have like some energy for when they're walking in.
Hello.
But if I'm feeling low and I'm like, oh, we're gonna watch a 20-minute video, and I'll break it down as we go.
Yeah.
But I can just feel like the whole room is somber, and they're just like, there's no, and if you, and so that's actually.
And that's a classroom management technique, right?
How do you manage to have the same, or attempt to have the same level of energy for each class? That has been a struggle for me, because I'm like, for me it's coffee, which is no secret, but like,
coffee.
What is, because like I literally, my students are like, Mr. Clark, why do you always make a Keurig pod at the beginning of third block every day? It's because I'm tired and I need to give you my energy.
And first semester when I didn't have, oh my gosh, first semester was like baptism by fire here, because I went from having a class of 10 students to 127 students. My lowest class numbers last semester was, I guess it was I had like a 20 person 30-2 split, but like 37. It was 37, 37, 37, and then 18. I was like, what? Oh my gosh. My biggest thing was because I didn't have that prep time, I had to come in an hour before school every day, send my emails, do my prep work. Like, I needed to be organized in order to be on, was my big thing, so that I wasn't panicking, being like, where is everything? But also have like a quiet moment.
I know.
The sound of 1,400 students in this school, like, it's a sensory overload.
Yeah. 3:30 is really.
Using music a lot. I have a classroom playlist policy thing. Wow. I'm loving it right now. We do, like, beginning of the semester survey when I'm asking them about learning style, all these things that I ask for, like, okay, what are your favorite songs right now? They have to be clean. Yeah. Like, if you can find a clean Kanye song, it's going on the thing. Yeah. That's no problem. Yeah. But I start class with music, like, that gets my energy up. Yeah. Classroom environment's big with me. I hate overhead lights. I hate the lights here. So my classroom was full of lamps and lanterns.
It does make a difference, though.
Huge.
100. Like, I don't even. As soon as I turn off even like one of the lights, everyone's like, oh, wow.
But I mean, you gotta keep one on, or they all sleep.
Yes, there's a balance.
There's a balance, but I think the way that you had to energize is to just remind myself, whatever's going on in my life, they all have stuff going on in their lives too, and if this class can be a break from that for them, and they can also learn something, mission accomplished. Yeah. If I can make content like Social 10 Globalization more engaging in 2023, mission accomplished. When, like, I'm so sick of that unit that's like, did you know that the internet means you can send email?
Homogenization, what?
The kids are like, sorry, what? They're like, faxing has revolutionized the economic systems of the world.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta know. Yeah. So I think the energy thing is just like, be that teacher, be that person, because in a couple of years you do get those emails about, like, I taught one day, like, I was teaching Macbeth and it was super spooky, and we had this awesome outdoor classroom in Anzac, and I was like, let's go have a fire and let's read spooky Macbeth, and I'm like flailing my arms around teaching Macbeth. Students remember that stuff.
School like fire pit.
Outdoor classrooms are the way of the future.
On board with that.
It's so nice. Just remembering, like, this is what they're going to remember your energy here. They will care if you do. They will. Like, there are kids who do not care about the NHL playoffs, but they care enough to send me an email when Boston's eliminated. They care enough to come to my funeral for my Boston Bruins shrine. Yeah. That's being put away for another day. That, like, if I put in that energy, like, it's like you have to, like, pump yourself up, though. And I think during COVID, there's that video of a teacher pumping himself up to go into a classroom.
Yes, I remember that. He, like, goes down and walks in, I'm like,
literally,
wow.
That is, I have to do that. There are so many days, unfortunately, that we are too tired and burnt out, but, like, that you have to, like, pump yourself up, slap yourself in the face a few times.
Well, yeah, because I find even right now, like, my block 4, so from 1:57 to 3:25, that's my 30-1. And so that's your last block of the day.
Ooh,
for myself.
Why are we doing course last block?
Well, no, I'm like, okay, it's unfair if I don't bring the same enthusiasm. Yep. The thing is, I'm having a pretty decent, or like similar pace in my 30-2 and 30-1. The
Yep.
same course, same content, obviously different assessment to a certain extent, but I'll give like the best lecture ever in 30-2. Best just being like, I'm like pumped up. People like are kind of asking questions. I mean, of the 16, 5 are listening, but I'm still like, it's after lunch, I'm feeling fresh. Then block 4 hits, and I'm like,
it's hard.
I have to do this again. And like, I purposely now I keep my classes at different stages, so I'm at least doing different content.
Oh yeah.
Because if you do the exact same slide 15 to 23, it's just not going to come out the same because you literally just talked about it. But now these are your kids who actually need you to be even more on because they're your high academic kids.
See, so I usually block 1 and 4 the same. My 10-1 is block 1 and 4.
Yeah.
And I don't mind going back to the same slides because this time I'm like, I have comfort in knowing I've already done it and I can do it again. And it's been a few hours, but it's hard to wrangle that energy sometimes.
Yeah.
Like
well,
block 3 to 4 before a holiday.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
No way.
There's nothing getting done. It's kind of the argument of like, do you plan for those first 5 minutes for the kids you know are going to be late because like it's the day before
dictionary.
It's the day before a holiday, so I do the dictionary.
Dictionary for me is, and it's a study tool. For a while, I was like, I don't think this is doing anything, and they're like, no, these are the concepts they need. I wouldn't even hate doing that for English because they.
Well, there's so much more.
Oh my gosh.
Arguably, it's more difficult to comprehend terminology in English.
Yeah.
Because like you can kind of know nationalism and like. You can kind of be like, oh, this is what appeasement means. You've been lectured content related to it.
Yeah, but like allegory, give me an example.
Yeah.
You're like,
I don't know.
Hidden message or me? It's,
But there's something to tie it to.
But that comes back to this like management thing of like structure, routine. They know the first 5 minutes, or it's usually 10 to 15, depending on how many terms I'm piling on.
Yes.
First 10 minutes, dictionary, then we're listening to the World This Hour.
Yeah.
We're discussing that. We're going into the lesson, and I try to follow that gradual release of responsibility model of like, I'm front loading with the lecture, and then you guys are going to do something in a group, and then there's an independent thing.
Yeah.
And at the end of that lesson, that end of that 9-minute block, if there still happens to be 10 extra minutes, 5 extra minutes, go get up, walk around, go to your friends, be on your phone, don't care because we did what we got to do. It can be exhausting for our kids, stamina-wise, but building it. Like I'm seeing such an improvement with so many of my classes now, because they maybe my reputation preceded me a bit. There was a couple of people who groaned when they walked into my room being like, Miss Morgan's the strict one. I'm like, good. I'd rather be known as high expectations all the time.
I know last semester I was way too nice at the beginning. But you have 37 in one grade 12 class, 36 in the other.
Yeah.
Then it was like November. I felt the diploma stress coming, and I could hear people be like, "Man, this Mark's like way meaner now." I'm like, yes.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? That's the language. They process sometimes discipline, regulation, and structure and routine as mean because they have not had structure and routine in 3 years that they interpret it as mean. Yeah. But oh gosh, coffee. Like if I'm ever told at a certain point in my life there's no more coffee. I resign. It's been great. Teaching's great, but it's so bad. It's such an addiction. I have a block 4 class now that sometimes one of my students will be like, "Miss, you haven't had your afternoon coffee," and we'll get up and go to my Keurig and make you the coffee.
I've tried to drink tea, and I'm like, oh,
no, there's no way.
This is not the stuff I need.
I need to be fueled. That's it. I think it's not.
I actually got to the point where I'll just say I perk my cup, and during 3rd block I'll drink this much. And then I drink to the beginning of 4 so that as I crash, the lesson crashes with me.
Yeah. Oh no, but then I get to extra, if it's an extra help day, I'm buzzing to come in. What do you want to learn? I'm just ready to go. Yeah. But that's kind of a management approach, and I'm not perfect at it. There are days where I am. I snap because it's just, how are you not getting these routines and expectations? Yeah. And there's little things that somebody we will take it personally depending on the kind of person you are. Students who are talking over me, that sends me into a dimension of rage because I interpret that as such high disrespect.
Yeah. Not even acknowledging your presence.
I'm trying to, come on up, you teach the lesson. That's not, I need to work on that reaction that I have because, again, I just see this, I'm seeing things in terms of a time crunch lately, and I don't know what that is about me right now.
It is I even have the internal teacher pressure one was like for our department, we moved our part A up a bit earlier than we thought, so that kind of that recalibrated everything. But realistically,
you know, it works. It works. But when I saw it
pressure.
and I looked at May, I was like you want to do
it's like okay, now I have 2 less weeks to front load my marking. That's kind of like what it was for me. It's like, okay, now I have to kind of hit all these main essays and mark them with like enough time in advance for feedback to prep them for that. I'm like, whoa.
See, not to brag, but my social 10 right now, I am exactly on track with my long range. I have no idea how that happened, but so like I'm not stressing at all. But I just English 12, you're just constantly like, it wouldn't even matter if it's 6 months. You're still like, it's happening. But I feel way more organized this year. I think that's the biggest thing that's a huge thing with classroom management. If the kids see that you don't have a clue what's going on day to day, if they feel like you are like pulling at straws, being like, I don't know, I think this unit ends on this day, they want structure. They want to see, the homework board in my class is a little intimidating, but they want deadlines, structure, expectation to help mitigate some of those like exam stress feelings, or just to know what's going on. So there's no surprises in my class. I'm not going to decide a new classroom rule one day.
And honestly, almost informally lately, I've been saying, okay, it'll be like a Monday, for example. We come back, and let's just say I moved the position paper a couple days. I'm like, okay, I moved the paper to, like, it was supposed to be next Tuesday, Wednesday, but now it's going to be next Thursday, Friday. The reason I did this is because, like, X, Y, and Z, like, we have Spirit Day, whatever, or I want to cover this content in a bit more depth before we get there. But, like, that tells, if I'm a student, I'm like, okay, this guy literally knows our next 2 weeks. He knows every single thing we're doing. I know what to expect now. Like, I know that these are, like, the main content days. I know we're going to be writing on these days. And that way it's like, and I know
helps them level up. It helps them be like, okay, this is the expectation, and I'm in this class, I'm in this stream, I'm in this whatever. If Mr. Clark knows that like what we're doing, then it's either sink or swim. I do it or I don't. Which I think is huge in high school. That jump from grade 9 to 10 is so hard, and it's not to say that it's not because junior high is not preparing them. No. But we are going from, especially some of their core courses are the whole year. Those poor teachers, and I remember that being like, how?
You are never not teaching your core. Wow. And
then now we're like, hey, guess what? Welcome to high school.
Twice as much work now done.
There's all these numbers, and we have to talk about this, Alberta. What are we doing? Like, okay.
Numbers, what do you mean?
Numbers. Grade 10-1. Okay.
Oh, like the dashes and the
streams. But why is grade 11-20? That doesn't even, that's not how numbers work. You're in grade 11, but it's called 20-1.
Yeah, and then there's like
grade 12 is 30-1, and like just call it the course. Like we call it in Nova Scotia. It is called
even the lights 12.
It is called Canadian History 11. It is not called English 20, Science 14. They got rid of.
I never understood the 14-24.
What does that mean? Why are we doing this? It's not even logical. It makes no sense. And like they connotations to -1 and -2, like the way that some teachers will talk about or approach -2 courses, and like they're still brilliant students. Like what?
The expectations for what the content they learn, especially in social, is not different. It's like
it is the same curriculum.
It's slightly less like intense for their written expectation, but like that's what I mean. Let's just say if I had my 30-1 class, third block, and then I get the fourth block for my -2s, and I half-ass it. It's like, well, that's actually not my job. My job is to give the equal.
-2 does not mean that there's lower expectations, and I love teaching 30-2 English. I love it. Maybe because I think I'm just an argumentative person, so I'm like, give me that persuasive. Let's do this. Let's do this. I think the way that we stream things is just so confusing. I love the language behind it. It's so funny when you talk to my teacher colleagues back on the East Coast, and they're like, what are you teaching this year? And I say English 30. They're like, what? 30 what? Like, what does that mean? 30 kids in English? Like, what? I'm like, no, try 37. But no, I always find that so funny. I also find, this is completely off topic, but I find it so interesting that in Alberta, you do not have to take a Canadian history course to graduate. In Nova Scotia, a requirement for graduation is Canadian history 11. And it's picture social 20, but with no international case studies. It's very much like, what was Canada's role in World War I? What were some key battles in World War I, and how did, what did like factory workers look like in Ajax? Ontario, and how did women enter the workforce.
Well, I mean, that's probably
It was amazing.
yeah.
I loved Canadian history. I loved it. It was I loved it. I'm like, how is that not a requirement? That also, I was kind of talking about this with my partner Tyler last night, that like, why are we teaching like civics in grade 9
Yeah.
to students who are exploding chemically,
Yeah.
who are not at a vote? Like, why aren't we teaching that in grade 12 when our kids are at voting age?
Yeah. Well,
Or
and
post
so
two.
in grade 12, like there's a part of the unit toward the end where you get to like Canadian and U.S. election systems and government. But realistically, there's no, as far as I know, there's not like specific case studies of, oh, this premier on this year and like the Alberta development, or it's just
like explaining first past the post.
What does
explaining the electoral college,
yeah,
like that stuff.
what does the prime minister do? It's like
okay.
It's like
but like
you,
there's such a lack. There is a lack of knowledge.
Canadian knowledge. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Like the students who have no idea who Diefenbaker is.
No.
What?
No. Like Diefenbaker?
What?
He's a baker.
Who do not understand like the repatriation of our constitution under Trudeau. They're like, where did it go? Who had it? Like, what?
Yeah.
Which was, I mean, R.I.P. But when the Queen died, so many very fruitful and interesting conversations in Social 20. The way that the timings just so happened that I was teaching Social 20 at the time.
Yeah.
For the first time, I never taught Social 20.
11.
That's grade 11 Social Studies, nationalism. And there was a lot of conversation about like, why does this matter for Canada? This day off, who's going to have this day off? Schools on the East Coast not going to school, and kids out west going to school on that day. If we consider it a holiday, why not? Students just, I think there's a lack of Canadian history and political knowledge that we somehow expect them to know and understand and appreciate, and then go vote on it.
Well, it's also, as a culture, we don't really value it. So that kind of bleeds into it, I think.
Yeah.
Because, again, I actually argue, I'm like, well, social studies is actually one of the courses you will take with you for the rest of your life.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And not, obviously I'm biased because that's all I teach, but like they don't understand. I'm like, oh, when you're complaining about X, Y, and Z about your government, it's like, okay, you're gonna have those conversations probably daily, if not weekly, at your future career.
Yeah.
And if you have zero idea what you're talking about, then you're just going to, I mean, you
can
can have a life of fruitless conversations if you want, but if we're not trying to communicate the importance of that knowledge and discuss it, then
shout out to Nova Scotia, I'm telling you. I'm sure. Okay, shout out to any other province that has students take a Canadian history class.
Yeah.
Or an Indigenous history class, like that should be in a mandatory.
Yes.
There should be no students that go to university not knowing what a treaty is or what residential schools were. Like I went to university and did not know what a residential school was, and was sitting in a Canadian history class, and like many other students in that room, looked around being like, that didn't happen.
I know, and especially in Alberta, like we kind of have the Aboriginal studies that you can kind of take as a separate kind of lane. But the idea that it's separate at all,
that makes no sense.
Strange.
It makes no sense. Like there's not enough focus, especially on nationalism in grade 11. We touch upon a bit about treaty relationships in the white paper, and but like it's so disconnected from context. And like Unit 2 in Social Studies does an excellent job at that. But I truly think Unit 2 Social Studies should almost be the entire course. Yeah. We really don't need an entire unit telling students that the internet exists. We don't. Well,
and even like the globalization thing, that could be your localized grade 10 angle. Like you kind of learn the
Unit
civics.
3 should stay.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So,
controversy.
Shifting gears.
Shift it.
Yeah. To finish off today, I have a quote that I really like, that I would like your thoughts on.
Ooh.
It says, "Education is what remains after we forget everything we learned in school." So my question is, what do you hope students take home with them after you are finished teaching them? That's outside of like conventional academic thought, like of who you are as a person, of like what you're trying to communicate to them. If anything, if you ever even
that learning doesn't have to be intimidating. Like it doesn't. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to be a genius to get these concepts. You don't have to be a genius to enjoy this stuff. That like, especially with, I guess, being a more theatrical teacher and being a more outgoing and very like performative teacher. A lot of what I do is like, it is who I am as a person, sure, but it's more, I am like turning it on to like a Broadway style when I'm in my class, is that I want kids to know that like learning can be really fun and it can be engaging, and you can be curious. You can not know things, have a curious mindset, learn it, great. And there doesn't have to be this intimidating, oh, I'm stupid because I don't get this. You can learn it, you can get better. Like there can be growth and it can be fun. And I want students to, and I get so like emotional and so happy when I get those emails from students being like, that podcast we listened to 5 years ago, he just got released, and what do you think about this, this, and this? And remember this fingerprint evidence? They didn't even test this. And like, they remember something from so long ago because I maybe found a creative way to teach an outcome. I want kids to, remember that part of my teaching, but also I hope that they see it, that I care way more about them as people than I do as students. That if you don't love English and if you don't love social studies, that does not change my opinion of you. And that like your growth outside of that and who you become and what you choose to do, like that's why I try to show up to as many sporting events as possible and as many extracurriculars as possible to show that matters. Like what you do in the classroom is a small portion of who you are, and as like maybe not be the right answer, because like your essay writing skills might not be the one thing about you that you're going to carry on with you. That's totally fine. I just hope you remember the passion that you can have for curiosity, that like you can be excited to learn. And if someone has a differing or challenging opinion from you, you don't have to be defensive and angry and degrade that person by calling them names. You can listen, you can accept, you can reflect. It doesn't have to be a confrontational process. So I look for those emails. When I get those emails or those messages from students at all about like, oh my gosh, miss, the Boston Bruins are out. That has no curricular connection, but they remember something that was important to me. Yep. And I get to...
And Bruins losing is also important.
Bruins losing is so important for them. Bruins is so important to losing that one student wrote "Go Panthers" in the dust on my window outside, and we've had no rain. So it's just every morning I look and I just see Panthers from one grade 12 student. So I hope it's that like your life can exist outside of the classroom, but your learning doesn't have to stop. I think it's mine.
Beautiful.
Peace out message.
We're gonna wrap it up.
Thank you so much. Go Canadian teachers, go.
Yeah.
This is a great idea. More Canadian teaching podcasts.
I agree. Let's get it done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hilary.
Yeah, no problem.
Hello again, everyone. Just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this conversation, and hopefully you enjoyed the conversation just as much as I did. If there are any issues with professional conduct and or you would like to share your own story, experience, or something you would like to contribute to the show, please reach out at lucasrdclark97@gmail.com or send a direct message on Instagram to @mrclark.afterdark. Hope you enjoyed, potentially found something of use, and of course, please do not forget to subscribe. See you next time, unless you're scared.